You are listening to the Terry Student Podcast, a student-run podcast dedicated to crafting community and engaging leaders at the Terry College of Business.
Welcome back to the Terry Student Podcast. I'm here today. I'm Caroline Lee. I'm here with Caleb Stevens as well, and we are also joined with a new host, Devin Summers. Devin, how are you this morning?
I'm doing good. Excited to be here.
Devin, you have the best radio voice I've ever heard. When I first heard it, I got so excited because I was like, you're going to kill it on this show. And you're just a sophomore, so you've got a couple years to really step into the role and really help the podcast grow and get it out to a lot more people. So we're awesome.
Low and slow.
Low and slow. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, Devin, how did you decide to get involved with the Terry Student Podcast?
Yeah, so I actually have been doing broadcasting for like 8 years now. I've never done podcasts, so this is completely new for me and really exciting, honestly, to meet all these really cool people and come in. But when I got acceptance into the ILA program, into the fellows program, I was approached by, I'm pretty sure it was Allison Porter, and she was like, hey, you know, Caleb's leaving. He's got a job. He probably doesn't need to be hanging around doing this anymore. And I was I was ecstatic and really, really excited to do this. So I jumped on it.
Well, awesome. Well, we're so excited, and we are excited for everyone to hear our interview this morning with Doug Benn. He is the CFO of the Cheesecake Factory and a UGA alum. He offered some great words of wisdom and some lessons that I think were very helpful and everybody can learn from.
I'm still waiting. I hope he brings it later today, some cheesecakes.
I know.
Because I've heard they actually make them in California. So, like, even if you're eating at a restaurant in Atlanta or somewhere around here, you know, that cheesecake was made in California. I could be wrong. I thought that's what a waitress told me one time. Don't quote me on it. You know, we don't want a lot of emailing people saying you're totally wrong. But who knows? Maybe he brought some cheesecake with us and he'll share it with us later today. We'll see.
Either way, I would love some cheesecake. It's one of my favorite desserts. But with that said, we are so excited for you all to hear our interview with Doug Benn and excited for him to be at Georgia today.
All right, so welcome Doug Benn, CFO of the Cheesecake Factory.
Thank you.
So good to have you on the show here. Just start off here at UGA, if you would, just talk about what kind of resources that UGA offers that you kind of grew from and really decided to take your passion, your plan, and took it into the real world.
Yeah, I would say that I think the biggest thing that I got from my time here at Georgia is that I learned self-confidence. I learned that I could do it, and I got that self-confidence from many sources. And certainly I had great professors that mentored me over time and challenged me. They offered me encouragement, but they were always willing also to give their time after class and to add additional perspective and to offer explanation. But I would also say that other students in the business school also helped me a lot. I don't think you can underestimate what you can learn by being around other people and spending time with them when they have common goals and objectives with you. So I found other students to be a big resource. And certainly the placement office, the people there were a big help to me when I was looking for my first job and opportunity outside of school. So all those things helped to build self-confidence for me, and that self-confidence has really been a cornerstone of figuring out what my next steps would be and what I would do during my career and really my overall life.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Kind of going off of that, as you started out in the real world, you started out at Arthur Anderson as a public accountant, and I'm also an accounting student. So just my own personal curiosity, how do you think that public accounting prepared you for your role that you're in now? And also, how did you know that you wanted to transition out of that into a role similar to what you're in now?
I think that's a great question. I think public accounting, particularly with one of the what's now the Big Four accounting firms, when I graduated as the Big Eight, but the Big Four accounting firms, I think that gives you a great opportunity to really continue your education, because when you get involved with one of the big accounting firms, they're going to immerse you in a lot of activity where you're applying a lot of what you learned. And I looked at it as continuing my education while I got paid. So that was a good thing. And over time, I transferred I started in the audit division with Arthur Andersen. I transferred later into tax. And, I decided that wasn't what I really wanted to do over the long term. I think mainly because I was fortunate enough that one of my tax clients was in the restaurant business, and I got involved in the restaurant and hospitality world. And really, with a small company, I had to expand really what I was doing outside of just accounting, because they really didn't have anybody else. So I had to do finance and risk management and all these other things that have to do with the non-operational part of a restaurant company, and I had to teach myself a lot of that in essence. So that's kind of how I got involved outside of accounting. But accounting and working for a public accounting firm was a great foundation for that.
Great, thank you.
So when you get up every morning, you're ready to go to work, what would you say excites you about going to work for the Cheesecake Factory? Is it the chance to hospitality and great service and a great brand and provide leadership? Or what are some things that really get you jazzed to be a part of such an awesome company and big brand globally, or at least nationally?
Well, it's global now too. Over the
Shanghai, that's right.
Over the last 6 or 7 years, we've begun to open restaurants internationally. So we have 15 international locations in different parts of the world. I'm very fortunate that I've worked for companies over time, and the Cheesecake Factory certainly being one of them, that have had strong core values. And the Cheesecake Factory especially has a very strong culture. And I really didn't realize how strong that culture was until I got there. And it's a culture of excellence. And there's a lot of pride involved in working with the Cheesecake Factory. It's such a difficult concept to execute well. I assume you've been to a restaurant.
Absolutely.
So there's 250 menu items, and they're all made from scratch.
Wow.
And they're made from scratch every day. And so this is a almost impossible concept to operate. And when it's operated well, then there's a lot of pride in being able to do that. And other people recognize that when you say, this is what I do. So, when I get up in the morning to go to work, I just want to, do my part in continuing that excellence.
Well, that Adam's peanut butter cup fudge ripple is probably the bar for me.
That's up on the top.
That is probably my number one out of a myriad of options you guys have.
Okay, well, good.
You talked a little bit there about internationally and cultures. How does working internationally and working with people who might have different cultural priorities as you, how does that challenge you as a leader, and how do you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. In fact, when we were thinking about internationally, cultural differences are one of the major reasons that we chose to license internationally rather than to operate the restaurants ourselves. So in the U.S., we operate the restaurants ourselves. Internationally, we use an local international licensee partner. And we have 3 international licensee partners today that are opening restaurants for us in various parts of the world. And those local operators know what's happening in their part of the world. They know what the cultural issues are. They know how to deal with those cultural issues when bringing our brand to their region of the world. And we work with our licensee partners, though, to achieve a balance of being flexible to cultural differences, but also remaining true to our brand, a brand that is, very popular in the United States. And we wouldn't want to, for instance, make unnecessary adjustments to the brand or to the menu that might be big drivers to our success just because there were these cultural differences. And to give you an example, when we were about to open in Dubai, in the Dubai Mall, which is a humongous mall, it's a 4-story mall in Dubai, there was a discussion with our licensee partner that maybe Mexican types of foods wouldn't resonate very well with people in Dubai. And we even had a discussion with our partner, should we take those items off the menu? Because they're presumably not going to sell anyway, right? And we wouldn't then have to go to the bother of prepping for them, making these items and getting ready to sell them every day, and they weren't going to sell. But what we decided to do was open the restaurant with the Mexican items on the menu anyway. And as it turned out, these foods were very popular. And in fact, during the first number of months that the restaurant was open in Dubai, nachos was the number one item that was sold on the menu. So, some cultural differences, I would say, are real, and some are, a little bit more perceived, but we work with our licensee partners to try to determine how to best address local cultural implications.
Gotcha.
Great. Another question I had is, in a constantly changing environment, how does the Cheesecake Factory and your role specifically, how do you all adapt with changes and try to anticipate consumer preferences or just where to go next?
Yeah, I think you're constantly doing that. If you're a viable restaurant business, you've got to think things are changing, like you say, all the time, and we're constantly anticipating. For instance, one of the things that we're known for is menu innovation. Mm-hmm. And we're one of the few restaurant brands, I think, that twice a year makes changes to our menu, and sometimes these changes are substantial, and they're in response to things that are changing. For instance, when the recession happened in 2009, we put we handed out a menu card, a specials menu that we called small plates and snacks. And it was created by our culinary team in response to the recession, and every item on there was a relatively lower priced item. Okay. So they still had the whole menu that they could order from, but they had these lower priced items that we thought would maybe resonate better with consumers during that point in time. A couple years ago, we put a whole new menu. We've got the 250 menu as well. We decided that wasn't enough. So we have a whole new menu called Skinnylicious. Have you seen that in the restaurants? There's you'll get the regular menu, then you'll get this kind of one that's skinnier. Right. And every item, there's 50 items on that menu, and every one of those items were 490 calories or less. So that was in response to people wanted to eat more healthy. I think people learned how to use the Cheesecake Factory over time, that you probably don't need to eat the entire entree along with an appetizer and a dessert, that just adds up to too much. But so people split, but we came up with that menu in response to the fact that we thought that there was consumer preference toward healthier eating, or at least eating fewer calories.
Okay.
Awesome. I want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. I was listening to a podcast just the other day, and the podcast was about public speaking out of all topics. And they were talking about the importance of, as a speaker, you probably only want to have 2 or 3 topics that you really specialize in. And a metaphor he referred it to was, think of it like a restaurant. A restaurant can't do a burger and nachos and teriyaki chicken and make it work. And one of the guys on the podcast butted in and he said, there's only one restaurant that could pull that off, and it's the Cheesecake Factory. And so my question is, how do you guys have such a broad menu and expand across so many different types of foods and still do it with excellence and do it well and kind of create some coherence and consistency with such a book of a menu?
That's a great question. I would say that in the restaurant business that we pretty much do everything wrong. That you wouldn't do this, and our ability to operate so many in making so many menu items from scratch every day, and to be able to do that well is a competitive advantage for us. So when the guy said that only one restaurant they can think of can do that, It's true. So I get asked a lot of times, well, tell me who the Cheesecake Factory competitors are. And the answer that I like to give, it's really nobody is a direct competitor and everybody is our competitor. A grocery store sells prepared meals as a competitor of the Cheesecake Factory, but there's nobody really that directly competes. So how do we do that? I just think that it really started 40 years ago upon the founding of the company, that and out of necessity, it was we developed this culture of excellence, and people really were trying to constantly improve. We've been able to keep people for a long period of time. We celebrate many, 12 and 15 and 17 year anniversaries, particularly at the leadership levels within the company. Like an area director is someone that has 7 or 8 restaurants that report to them. And the average tenure we have for area directors is 15 years. So they've been doing it for a long time. They know how to operate in that complex environment. So I think that's part of how we do it. And it's important that we continue that, because I think it is a competitive advantage.
Absolutely.
So not only do you have all of these menu items, but you have other business units as well. I mean, Rock Sugar's opening, and you have Grand Lux Cafe that's already established. So how do you manage those, and how does opening a new business unit change what you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, I would say that that whenever we open a new business unit, they all always have their own unique challenges, and they all require adjustments or things that we need to change. With respect to Rock Sugar and Grand Lux Cafe that you mentioned, those are 2 smaller concepts. It's really for them, it's how do we build those restaurants and operate them with the unit economics and the return on investment that would make it similar to what a Cheesecake Factory is. So we're not as far along on the development of those brands, and their unit economics are not up to what Cheesecake is yet. So that's one of the challenges in opening them. Opening internationally offers a lot of other unique challenges for us that require us to change. For instance, when we opened in Dubai, in the Middle East, first one was in Dubai, we had to adjust the menu because there was no alcohol or pork allowed. So you couldn't have alcohol, and you couldn't have bacon. And so we have bacon in recipes that we use, so we had to change that. Right. And so that required adjustment and change. Certainly when we opened in Mexico, we hit our first language barrier, but that language barrier was nothing compared to the language barrier of when we opened in China. So it's not only the language barrier, it's the written. It's not only spoken language, it's the written language too. Is much more complex, obviously, to read these Chinese characters. And you should see a Cheesecake Factory menu written with the Chinese characters. That's very interesting. And we're going to open up in Canada later this year. And that's going to be a new challenge for us, because that's going to be the first international location that we open ourselves, as opposed to using a licensee partner. So that'll have new challenges for us, because we generally have the help of these licensee partners when we're opening restaurants.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Another thing I was curious about is, having worked in a variety of different areas and being a CFO, I was curious how, over the years, how your role has changed as a CFO, and if you feel like it has changed since you started, and where it's at now. Is it expanding? Is it contracting? What sort of things do you think have changed?
It just in my personal journey, I was lucky enough to start off with being a CFO when I probably wasn't even qualified to do that, but it was a very small company. So I kind of started off with learning what it really took, and to be a CFO, and just kind of stepped in as needed. And I didn't have a lot of staff. I mean, it wasn't like I had like 40 people working for me. It was like 6, something like that. So it was a very small company. And I've just grown over time, because my next position was with a public restaurant company, and it's much different. being
Right.
a CFO for a public restaurant company than it is. So the first company was very private, very entrepreneurial. Changing in my roles necessitated me to change in what I was doing as a CFO. With a public company, I had to rely much more on my ability to build teams of people that were going to be able to take care of a lot of the day-to-day stuff. We were talking about accounting earlier, and I'm an accounting major. When I was with the first company, I did a lot of accounting work as part of that, and as I moved on, I did less and less accounting, and I had to build teams of people that were going to be able to do that, and because I couldn't get myself involved in that level of detail and still be effective in leading and helping with formulate strategies for the business and financial strategies primarily, and then overall operational strategies as well. So that's how my role kind of evolved, I think.
Okay, great.
I heard a quote the other day that said, when talking about business leadership, and sometimes you just got to get away just to kind of clear your mind and reflect and kind of think through. And the quote was, a change of place plus a change of pace equals a new perspective. And I'm just curious, living in the greater LA area, I'm sure there's lots of beauty and mountains. How do you unplug? Do you have any hobbies and ways that you can kind of balance work, but also taking care of your health and family and those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, moving to California was a decision that was pretty easy for us based on the point in time in life that we were in. And I really didn't know much about Southern California before I moved there. And my sort of perception of it before I moved there was that it was sort of like a concrete jungle and nothing but traffic. That's really not, the traffic part's true, but there's really nothing like that. I am surrounded by hiking trails, and it's mountainous. You drive from LAX out to where I live, and it's just, you're surrounded by mountains. In fact, I'm in the Santa Monica Mountains, but the San Gabriel Mountains are right over, and they're 10,000 foot mountains. So these are not small mountains. These are not like eastern mountains. These are western mountains, and there's all kinds of hiking trails. So one of the things that I probably did it earlier on more than I do it now, and I was just thinking about that the other day. I need to do more of it, but I got out and probably did like 3 hikes a week. I bought the Hiking in Ventura County, or Los Angeles County book, and I went through and I did all of these different hikes, and I loved that. And it kind of helped me keep myself in shape, and it's just one of the things that's great to enjoy about living in Southern California.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on. You have incredible wisdom and insight for all of us. So thank you for coming and talking with us.
I'm glad to do it.
Thank you.
Well, that was our interview with Doug Benn. Man, what a fun guy. That was such a cool conversation. What did you guys think? Anything that stood out to y'all?
Yeah, I thought it was great. It was interesting just to hear his perspective and where he's been with. I thought it was interesting, since I'm an accounting major, with where he came from doing that and where he is now, and just his transition out to California. I think that he had a lot of great life lessons and advice.
Yeah, I liked how he talked about his peers at Georgia. I mean, you see this guy who's in charge of so much at such a high level, and then the things that he kind of accredits his success to, especially finding his way, is just his peers at Georgia. And I thought that was really cool, especially being a student and being around so many amazing people here. Like, they can take you very far and do a lot. So
yeah, I love seeing just how so many alumni have gone so many cool places after the University of Georgia. A lot go back to Atlanta if they're from there, but a lot of them go to New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco and really make an impact with the things they learned here in Terry, which has been really cool. Well, man, I think this is the last show of this semester, which is kind of sad. Wow. We're approaching finals, the end of the semester, but it's been a great time. I've had so much fun being a part of this show and this podcast and creating conversations that add value to you, the Terry student. That's what we're all about here. We're all about strengthening the Terry community and creating conversations that we can all learn from and benefit from. So signing off from the Terry Student Podcast for the last time is Caleb Stevens, but we'll see Devin Summers and Caroline Lee in episode 20 next semester. So get excited.